All right, so we're going to go back to your. You did many short films growing up. How was that kind of guiding you along your career?
I think short films are a really good way to cut your teeth in storytelling with music. You know, I mean, it's to the point. I mean, I think a lot of stories have the same sort of formula. So when you're working on them, you can kind of pack a lot more learning curve, if you will, into a short form, and it's you can kind of crank out more at a time, I guess. But it's a great way to really learn the craft and get better at storytelling.
So then, what was your first either professional or non-professional animation gig?
Well, my first, okay, so this is my first animation series. It's Gremlins, Secrets of the Mogwai, and I had done some animation in college. I don't think that counts though, but this is my first animation, and it's really been the coolest thing, and I'm kind of hooked. I want to do more now.
What
Yeah.
was the biggest transition from you moving from something like Riverdale to animation? What did you have to change your approach? Did you have to change the way you were thinking?
I wouldn't say that my approach is any different from project to project, except for that this being Gremlins, it's coming into a franchise, it's already in existence, trying to fill some big shoes. Obviously, Jerry Goldsmith scores, which was actually a really great experience. I wasn't even being asked to do that. I was being asked to bring a new sound, paying homage and to Jerry's and Joe Dante's vision in the original films. But I was very much encouraged to come up with a sound that matched what the show was doing now, and very different. So.
Do you find its animation is maybe a little more freeing since you're not bound by realism in a lot of ways?
I think that's a great way to put it. I think that animation, it's a lot more surreal, so there's a lot more opportunity for music to make something more believable. You can kind of lean into the drama, the adventure, you don't have to be as reverent about it, I guess. But it's a lot of responsibility. I think you're telling a story in a way that I think live action doesn't necessarily always leave the same kind of room to tell those stories as animation does.
We talked a little last time about your opening, which I really did love for Secrets of Mogwai. I'd like to talk. So, as you developed it, what was more challenging as the series went on for you? What was your biggest challenge?
Trying to come up with something that feels better than the last one. It was I don't know. The adventures kept getting bigger and bigger. Gizmo and Sam and Elle, they all go on bigger adventures, and so literally as the story gets bigger, the music doesn't always have to get bigger, but I think that was part of the quest and the challenge for me is how do I get bigger? How do I top that last one? How do I be just as amazing as the show is in each episode?
Okay, so we know, as you know, we have a lot of students in our audience. That's one of your audience. What would you want them to study from Gremlins? Let's say, is there a scene or sequence or sound like, listen, watch that because I was most proud of it, or is one that I struggled with the most trying to get right?
That's a great question. Second season is coming out, so I'll have to save that answer for maybe next Comic Con, and so I can spill the beans on that. But in the first season, there was this. I forget which episode it is, but there's a place where Gizmo returns home. He finally gets home to the Valley of Jade, and he's looking out over the whole valley, and he's home. And so I decided to use Gizmo's theme. Da, 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 da. And then, which is of course Jerry Goldsmith's famous theme for Gizmo, and then I found myself when writing it launching into the theme that I had written for the Valley of Jade, and I didn't realize they were going to mash up so well, where one melody ends, the one that I had written just kind of picks up, and it was kind of a goosebump chill moment because you're like, wow, when something really, really works that I didn't even intend to do. So it was this. So my friends call it a Jerry Sherry mashup or a Sherry Goldsmith mashup or a Jerry Chung. I don't know. It's one of those. But it's a really cool musical moment that really happened accidentally. But I think again with Jerry's incredible theme and then hopefully at least a theme that was worthy to be next to it. Together, it came into something that I think was elevated by both things coming together.
For a final question, I got to deviate a little because based on a true story, I got to ask you about that. You were at UCLA recently at an event when I was there, and you performed it live with the orchestra. The thing. How was that experience?
The Deadline concert at UCLA was so cool. It was really cool to be up there with the lineup that there was, just the amazing composers and the shows that were being represented. So pretty marvelous in and of itself. But yeah, there was also the aspect of being able to perform your music and hear it live and have it be seen and heard. Because let's face it, our music is not always seen and heard because, just it serves a picture, it serves a purpose, and sometimes it's just not what the music is there for, is, to be front and center. But this was a case where it was solely about the music, and it was fun. And everyone was like, "Oh, the music was synced so well to the video." I was like, "Yeah, I cut the video to the music." I'm like, for once, it's about the music, not the picture. So it was a really, really great experience, and very, very grateful for it.
All right, so you and I have talked before. We've had very limited experience with serial killing. Limited for both of us. I mean, we've done it. We've done it. We talked about practicing. How fun was it kind of doing a score where things are really ambiguous and gray? Did it free up maybe a little more musically?
Yeah, it was hard. It was actually really difficult to find the right tone, to find the tone that would allow an audience to laugh, but maybe nervously laugh, and still, make us love our heroes and also make us love our villain as well. It was kind of an interesting line to walk, and I found myself having to kind of almost walk like very controlled tension. It wasn't. Sometimes it would lean one way or the other into highly comedic or highly horror, but a lot of times it was also just how do you walk that line and just keep that pace going and keep everybody guessing.
Is that something you might recommend young film composers and TV composers push the boundary a little? Maybe go for something like that, a little gray?
100%, and I feel like it's what I generally do in a demo. If I'm demoing for a project, I will go hard into a stylized idea, and I will tell you, it doesn't always work out. I don't always get the project. Sometimes it's just a little too much, but it's also like, what do you to lose at that point? You didn't get the gig before, you might not get the gig now, but that was a demo that I really, really pushed for, and it was just like, I'm just gonna go crazy and wild and stylized because that's what the show was doing, and I just tried it out, and I think it worked, and you know what? What's great is getting the feedback from the producers and the showrunners and even the actors who've seen it and listened to the music. They get really excited about it. They're like, wow, if this is it really not only just matches, but it's its own kind of character, which I think a lot of us are sort of striving for in our jobs. But it's push the boundaries. Don't be afraid. I mean, the worst that happens is they tell you to dial it back. There's nothing wrong with being deemed too nutty, too crazy.
Sounds like it's better to pull back sometimes, and actually, if you don't go far enough, then they might just say, well, you're not right for it.
Absolutely. I mean, like present an idea, present a point of view. I think that's really important. Present a point of view, and there are times when you know that your point of view needs to be a little bit more down the middle. There's times when you know that, but I mean, if you have an opportunity to really push something and go nuts, try it out. There's not much to lose. And again, this is creative fulfillment, so if you can get something out of it too, I think that's a plus. It's a win-win.
First question, because we have a lot of students in the audience. What was your first professional or non-professional animation gig?
Oh, okay. My first non-professional animation gig, it was a student film that I scored when I was still studying in Berklee College of Music. I scored to like a storyboard that an artist created from Emerson College, and that was ignited my love to score for animation because I found that there was so much room for the music to be part of the storytelling and the world building. So that would be my first non-professional one. But my first professional one was Skydance Animation's first project called Blush. It's now on Apple TV Plus, and that was their first project they put out, and I'm really honored that I got to contribute the score to that. So.
Going back to the Berkeley thing, did you know were you interested in animation at the time, or were you thinking a different path when you first started, like I can do this professionally?
I've always wanted to score for film and TV, but animation was a medium that I always felt really compelled to because I grew up watching animation. I loved the golden Disney era with like Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid, and I love all the scores from it. So I've always wanted to do that. So that was kind of like my first introduction to like actually collaborate on an animation project.
Do you feel that animation is in some ways more freeing as a music storyteller as compared to live action?
I think so because you're really part of the world's building. You're building something from scratch, including the animation. And I feel like there's just less limitations, like in terms of creativity. You get to really push the boundaries, and you get to be as creative as you can, and really go into the imaginative world. And I think that the music is definitely a huge part of that world building and storytelling.
Sounds like to me also that you definitely have to be more in sync visually with the way the style is, because it will affect how you score if they go off in a weird, surreal direction.
Absolutely. So for Wandla, the TV series that I just scored, I was fortunate enough to be brought on early on the project, and I was able to see a lot of this. I read the scripts. I had them send me like character designs, location designs, set designs, and color keys, whatever. To me, it's like kind of, as a composer, it's like research. I want to make sure I know like what is the groundwork that I have to cover, and like what can I do in the music to also show that those characteristics. So they inspired me, but they also wanted my music, so it inspires them. So it's a very like, we're kind of both departments inspiring one another. Then they can really be part of that storytelling. That to me is really exciting.
That's a little different than live action because a lot of the students don't really realize oftentimes in live action you don't see it till it's actually done.
Exactly, and also live action, like we're relying on real life actors, and it's kind of different in animation where I feel like you get to be even more imaginative, and sometimes music is really forward when you are part of that storytelling. So it is a different mindset that I have to put when I'm scoring like a live action film versus an animation film. So
We could talk a little Barbie.
yeah.
So Barbie, you took Barbie global. Yeah. So was that kind of fun stretching Barbie into a whole kind of a global audience and a whole new way of telling her story?
Yeah, I mean, so it's Barbie Mysteries is actually the upcoming animated series on Netflix. That one's super fun because you see the two Barbies, Brooklyn and Malibu. They're like solving crime, and they're like really analyzing like who stole the horse, and it's like part of the new series coming up. And that's really fun because you're right, it's really at a global scale, and like kids of all ages can watch it. And I love that it's a film, it's a TV series that really can inspire girls to be like, oh, we can also be there, solve crime. Like I hope it can inspire all the little girls out there.
Did you want to solve crime when you were a kid?
Of course. I mean, I loved like Totally Spies. Like I love that. I love Kim Possible. I love Powerpuff Girls. Like I grew up in that era, so like I love all of that. So to be able to write music for that, it's so fun, and especially for Barbie, like I'm really excited for people to watch that.
Star Wars. I'm not sure who actually composed the original music. I think it was a nobody. I don't remember. No, the original Star Wars '77. John Williams was okay. So was there any pressure when you take on that role?
Absolutely.
It's so easy.
So initially that was me. You were how old when I got that gig in 2006?
I was still in high school, or I think I'm still in high school or
Six.
college. Maybe.
So,
Oh, no.
yeah, it was terrifying. And I had to rearrange the theme, and I argued with George Lucas that was a bad idea. And I really did, but because I said, he did that properly the first time, kind of the whole Amadeus, every note was in its right place kind of thing. And George is like, no, I want something, I want percussion in it and stuff. So that was terrifying. It's not the favorite thing I've ever done, but I think I didn't screw it up. And that's the best that could have been accomplished in rearranging the Star Wars theme. After that, it was much smoother because I used a lot of his techniques, but not his motifs. And only a few times did I use his motifs, and then the score grew out of that.
So it's just more balancing, keeping honor to the original, but also realize you're telling a different story. This is not the original Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Wars grew, and the music had to grow too, in a different direction. Not better, not worse, just different. Certainly not better than what John did. I will never ever say that. I mean, he's the master. He's the greatest film composer of all time.
All right, so for you, how has it been for you kind of now exploring Star Wars music and creating your own?
I mean, it's really nice that we get to just follow the precedent that our father set, where he had to figure out what the balancing act was, like when to use John's themes, when to use like what sounds like John Williams, or when to try to push the boundaries and try to introduce a new instrument and like put something that feels more alien, feels further from John Williams, but when to bring it back. He always, he was really great about guiding us and letting us know, what he thought was working and what was, probably a bad idea that we shouldn't probably put in anyone's face.
In my head, I feel like the secret sauce to Star Wars is that it's an analog, it's an alien analog for the familiar. And so we kind of take that same kind of hermeneutic and apply it musically, right? Where we will take some familiar instrument and play it in a way that's like a little alien, or we take a strange instrument and we play it in a more conventional way. And we'll use it like an organic instrument. You know, we'll use a big brash synth like as a horn for just a off-the-cuff example. But we always stay true to the genre that John Williams invented. Basically, you know, there are certain conventions, you know, and we can always return to that sound at the core of Star Wars.
I have a generic question about animation versus live action. Do you feel, from composing animation compared to live action, do you feel animation is a little more freeing?
You know, I think story-wise, it's easy to do more fantastical things in animation. You don't have to suspend your disbelief because your imagination is kind of in, and so in that sense, musically, we just go along with that fantasy, you know, and this is sci-fi. We're in outer space. We're in a galaxy a long time ago, far away, and we play the magical aspect of that in the animation. In Star Wars animation, I would say writing the live action and writing the animation is not that much different. What's more different is I scored Narcos Mexico. That's way different. That's way different than writing Star Wars. So for me, project to project is more different than writing between animation Star Wars and live action Star Wars. They're quite similar.
Does it feel like different per project?
Yeah, every project has its own kind of soul, its own kind of spirit. It's just whatever the characters are doing, like you really have to pay attention to exactly what they're trying to tell with the story and reflect what you're seeing in picture. And yeah, it just depends. Like you have to tell the story of like where you are, like what the setting is, what it feels like, what emotion the character is going through. So it's just very varied.
All right, for our last question, I'd like you to assign our students an assignment. If they were to study one film or TV show, could be an episode, a feature film, could be also an obscure one, what would you want them to study to get a good lesson in composing?
Good lesson in composing. I feel like watching Phantom Menace, because it's a really interesting way to look at Star Wars, because he changes how Star Wars sounds. You already have 3 movies worth of Star Wars established, right? So you see, okay, how does he treat leitmotif differently now when he's starting this new trilogy? How does he, how does that interact with the general kind of vibe that George Lucas was going for, which was like 30s camp, right? Whereas the original trilogy was more like 70s camp. This was harkening back even earlier to 30s camp with the prequels, right? And so see like how that interacts, how John chose to interact with the story for the prequels with Phantom Menace. And I think it'll be really illuminating.
Well, thanks so much for joining us.
I have to answer that question because it's very important to me.
Of course, go for it.
And I'm going to cheat. I'm not going to give just one film because when I was a young film composer, say in the 80s, my heroes were John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, Ennio Morricone, and John Barry. And I would go and find great films like The Mission by Ennio Morricone, Superman or Star Wars by John Williams, you know, by Jerry Goldsmith, Demon one, The Omen by Jerry Goldsmith, you know, any stuff that John Barry did, the Bond films or Out of Africa or something like that. Fantastic melody that goes with the film really well. And that we don't have enough of that these days. So I would love young composers to start doing that again.
That's it.
Ratatouille. No, like just watch the way that the music follows the character, the movement, and like it weaves in themes like in these small little moments that like it's perfectly placed. It's all so intentional. I love the way that he scores.
Well, you got a lot of students in the audience now have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But fun work.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.